What is the biggest red flag in a guy? And what do you think is a red flag with the guys? Comment and enjoy the show. Story 1. When he takes you to a chain across the street from another chain and leaves every 10 minutes for exactly 10 minutes, then rolls up like a hitter taking third all disheveled the entire meal. You're thinking, okay, he's got IBs, no big deal, but then you see him eating cheddar biscuits while you're at the Applebee's, and specifically told him you wanted to go to Red Lobster for the biscuits, but he said they had plasmathera in them, which you're pretty sure isn't a thing, but he seemed so sure. And it gives you cancer? And then he runs away again and you see him in the window of the Red Lobster with your best friend's sister-in-law? Story 2. Acting like there's some kind of authority figure on everything and getting offended by any kind of skills or knowledge that you have, except maybe stuff that's considered specifically feminine, like how to apply makeup. A lot of men do this to women, and in my experience, the worse it is, the more abusive they'll get in general later on. This goes for all interactions, not just relationships. Story 3. Brushing off tasks very easily, acting different around friends, and lying or keeping habits and hobbies secret. Liking everything you like too because everyone is different. Life isn't a fairy tale. That's just what I've noticed when I were a student at college. People I wouldn't want to associate with and thought it applied here. Story 4. He allows his relatives to lie to him about you or say negative things, too, about you and doesn't stand up for you. Allows his relatives to ignore your boundaries and feelings. Example, the guy in the post whose mother wanted to try on his fiancé's wedding dress and kept pushing despite being told no multiple times. Fiancé came home early one day to find her FH in the apartment blocking her access to their bedroom. She heard a noise in the bedroom and ran past her fiancé, only to find his mother trying to force her wedding dress onto her body. The dress had special craftsmanship that ripped when the mother tried to yank the dress over her head. Fiancé screamed at her FMIL and kicked her out, and her FH was mad at her for upsetting his mom. I'm sure you all remember the story in which the FMIL refused to pay for the dress to be replaced, and her spineless mama's boy begged her to let him pay for it so his mom would stop crying. Story 5. He can't handle even minor disagreements and gets defensive if you try to tell him when his behavior is a problem. Usually solid signs someone has narcissistic tendencies. My ex-husband couldn't even handle disagreeing about which Democratic candidates we liked in the primaries. Not which party we voted for, which candidate from the same party we liked. Now I get judged because my current boyfriend is more conservative, but he isn't a dick about politics and generally treats me with respect, which I realize is a lot more important than what you agree on. Story 6. If bad things keep happening and it's always someone else's fault. Like bro, bad things have happened in my life, but all of them were at least partially my fault. That and physical aggressiveness. People who have been in a real fight don't ever want to do it again. If the guy is constantly starting shit with other men in conversations, he's not a badass. He's just a bully who hasn't been put in his place yet. Story 7. Still talking about his ex from when he was 11 to his current girlfriend, 4/5 years after they broke up. My ex-boyfriend did this to my best friend, who he was dating, and was constantly trash-talking me. We were dating when we were 11. He ended up breaking up with my best friend because he's not ready for a relationship. Hun, you aren't over your one from 5 years ago. Story 8. When he starts off great, then tapers off just giving you breadcrumbs to keep you interested. Then he builds it back up, but starts backing away again. If it keeps getting repeated, you're prob who he goes to when he's having issues with his girlfriend. Story 9. How they act when they don't get what they want. I was seeing a dude who was great in person, great vibe, good connection on all our dates, but as soon as I said I didn't want the same stuff, aka sex, he was all passive-aggressive and attacking my character. So yes, that. Story 10. Obviously pushiness and refusing to take no for an answer, including on non-sexual topics. Insecurity is the biggest one. In my experience, insecure men are very manipulative and intentionally damaging to their partner's self-esteem since theirs is so low. Another one, men who love to teach their partner things but give off weird vibes when you know more than them or don't need teaching on a subject. These ones think their opinions are more valuable than their partner's. Story 11. I had an alcoholic boyfriend who was very needy, kept saying, "When I ask you to marry me, you're going to say no, and then I'll kill myself." I think I was supposed to reassure him I wanted to be with him forever, but I kept replying, "Then don't ask." Because alcoholics don't marry, they take hostages. Story 12. Red flag. Finds every excuse in the book to go back to his place for the first date. Bright red flag. Progressively gets more upset when you reject each of his come back to my place requests. Flashing neon lights, red flag, assumes you just sleep with other men on the first date and wonders what is so wrong with him that you can't do the same. I have experienced all of these. Story 13. Constant drinking, and a temper associated with it. Jealousy, projecting personal issues on you, money issues, also unable to do anything socially, dates, parties, sporting events, vacations with just you. They always have to have friends or family members come too. Story 14. Adding, because I just thought of another. My ex used to annoy me and then call me dramatic when I finally got mad and yelled or showed frustration. He thought it was funny as fuck to piss me off. Then he'd get mad or pissy with me when I was in a bad mood because he would annoy the shit out of me. Example. I would be trying to get something, remote, lighter, whatever it was, and he would grab it first and then play keep away until I was so mad I would just start screaming at him. Then he would get an attitude, hand it to me and say, "You are so dramatic," or "Quit being such a drama queen here." Story 15. Love bombing. I've honestly never felt this way about anyone. I really like you. It's crazy the connection we have. Honestly, I don't know how I got so lucky you responded to me. If a guy has to keep adding honestly, really, for real, then they probably aren't being honest. They are just trying to get you to believe them and let your guard down. Story 16. The biggest red flag in a guy can vary depending on individual preferences and values. However, some common red flags might include dishonesty, lack of respect, controlling behavior, or an inability to communicate effectively. It's important to trust your instincts and prioritize your own well-being in any relationship. Story 17. Victimhood mentality sob story. If things are always unfair, not their fault, consistent bad luck, then at best you are looking at incompetency, and at worst it's a narcissist looking for the next free ride or a con man. Just remember, I don't want no scrub. And yeah, that goes both ways. Pick-me's gotta stop the drip feed and breeding options to losers. Our society sucks as it is. Story 18. Not being able to discuss issues without immediately getting defensive and trying to shift the blame. Conflict happens, but it doesn't have to be a fight. When you try to calmly discuss something with someone, and their first response is, well, you do, insert random unrelated thing, it shows that they have no interest in even considering fixing the issue. Story 19. Finding a girl online, like Snapchat, Reddit, and immediately asking what she looks like just translates to, I want to see if you're fuckable to me. No thanks. Hoe behavior, at least ask me how I'm doing first. Doing that just gives off the impression that they try and bang every woman they talk to IMO every time a convo starts like that. All they're gonna want is nudes or a hookup from my experience. Story 20. When you meet him for the first time and you're led into a secure corrections facility where you walk down several levels, each darker and creepier than the one before, then down a hallway past several serial killers, one of whom throws his semen on you, and then to his cell, where he is standing perfectly still and staring at you when you arrive, as if he had been expecting you his entire life. Story 21. It's funny to see how many of these apply directly to Trump, but also what makes a red flag in a guy? Supporting Trump. Never will you find a bigger sign someone is going to not respect you for being a fully functional human being than Trump support. Will a Trump supporter treat his wife and kids well? Maybe, but only because they're his. He owns them in his mind. Story 22. From the crazy stuff I've heard at tech conferences, some creeps specifically try to date Asians under 5.4 height, then complain food is too spicy. There are some folks at Cisco that need to suffer loads of Singapore-style fire noodles, spicier than Korean noodles. Also, sales reps at a few firewall and security appliance companies say lots of Asian sexist jokes or references in their demonstrations. There is a reason why InfoSec scares women. Story 23. When he starts wearing all gold, he will wear gold God, blue, his sadness, white, his soul, and red, himself. Must you know everything? Did Jesus look for signs? Jesus said no signs would be given. Jesus said not to trust outward appearances. Do you have fun when you're with him? Does he bring you joy? Will he be a good role model for young boys? Story 24. Not having a sense of style. I don't have to like it, but it has to be there. I've dated too many people without a sense of self, and not having a sense of style is the perfect proxy for that for some reason. It shows up like them buying clothes for themselves only because they think I will like it on them, not because they particularly like it and stuff like that. Story 25. Red flags, pressures you / pushes to have sex, always runs the show, leaves you hanging / has no regard for your feelings. It's amazing anyone could get wrapped up with someone exhibiting those behaviors, but they're wrapped up in other incentives like promise of adventure or lifestyle or a relationship, and the person who falls for it can be willfully or naively blind to the faults in pursuit of the perceived positives, even if the faults contradict the positives. But in my experience, The men who have had the above character traits, selfish, pushy, always turned out to be horrible partners, and the relationship either didn't go anywhere or was a train wreck. Story 26. This will probably be controversial, but I find it a red flag if a guy openly identifies as a male feminist. In my experience at least, the men who are super vocal about how much of a feminist they are usually only doing it to try and hide how they are actually a raging sexist. Eventually it all unravels, and their true self comes out. Men who actively respect women and women's rights don't usually feel the need to broadcast it so vocally. They just showcase it in their actions in day-to-day life. Story 27. A love bomber, the guy who elevates you to goddess status. Just turn and walk away. That crap cannot and positively won't be sustainable and very often turns abusive when you can't praise him enough, can't appreciate him enough, and there aren't hours enough in a day to meet his expectations. Story 28. I think if exhibits overall arrogance about his maleness, not manliness but that machismo stuff. The self-M*****sturbatory, ego-stroking, within the male spectrum is a huge red flag to me. I consider it to be a warning to both men and women that there are some serious underlying insecurities as well as possible needs for therapy there. Story 29. If he doesn't let you finish speaking before he starts speaking. As a male myself, we do this when the other person is perceived by us to be less important or inadequate. When a man respects you, he will not allow you to finish speaking. He will listen, then respond. Ladies, if you're single, and they are single, and you think that you can't finish a sentence before he responds, it means he is trying to do what we call in the business a hit it and quit it. It's a technical procedure, but it happens all the time. Story 30. Switching up behavior when they don't get what they want. My ex is usually a very affectionate, warm, and outgoing guy, but one night I declined him sex. He immediately acted like he was a blank void, no personality at all, just coldness. Like the contrast of how he usually behaved was scary. He'd stonewall until I confronted him in tears, and then he'd make it all better, and I found myself apologizing to him. Then he'd get what he wanted, and was back to his bubbly, cheerful self. Once I realized this was a pattern, and he'd stonewall any time I declined, I was out. Dude was trying to train me to not refuse him. Story 31. Any discussion leads to just blaming you and even bringing up unrelated topics to blame you, or enlisting things where you are at fault. Basically, he has a running log of what things you have done wrong, and never takes accountability, except in very, very rare cases. And you double take that, why are we discussing X when we were talking about Y? So you are left confused, and feeling worse that you are all the problem. Story 32, from the relationships I've had. Excessive drug use, it will escalate and keep doing so, don't kid yourself. All day, every day, but denying that's the reason they're struggling so much. Slightly sexist / misogynistic / homophobic comments, they're either an uninformed idiot or potential abuser. Lack of drive, to change themselves, their situation, and cannot be challenged on their viewpoints because to them, it's not right. Outward anger. Stress from a situation is turned outwardly to the people around them, often making others miserable or blaming someone for what's happened. E.g., I was inconsiderate and a nag because I wanted more help with housework when I was the only one working full-time, and all he'd do was cook dinner and get high, partially on my dime. Then I was a bully when I got angry and shouted back, not usual, after weeks of snide comments, and took away the substances I paid for. The statement, keep dating because I don't want to stop you from meeting people. Sudden behavior change, acting one way for a while and then seeming to change in an instant, always makes me cautious. Story 33. I like this answer. I feel like it isn't a priority for parents to teach their children manners anymore, and it is creating a new generation of rude little shits. I'm talking about the basics like please and thank you. Practically the first things we taught our kids. My husband has nice manners, holds the door for people, says please and thank you, and generally just strives to be polite to those around him. Story 34. Experience really from hearing it across my own hall, a man who is always trying to find a reason to yell. He screams and talks really loud a lot, and I hear him bitching at his girlfriend all the time about the littlest, stupidest shit. Kinda irritates and annoys me a lot having to drown myself in music so I don't have to hear his gums flapping. Wish they would move away. Story 35. Unless your family is dangerous, keeping you hidden could be a significant asset. Magicians are great at this kind of thing. Start with catching a cup of milk at the hotel diner and just see where it goes. There is a good chance that the magician will ultimately hide himself from you, so you'll still be eventually found by family. But magicians are exciting, huh? Maybe you gotta type now. See where that leads you and follow your heart. Story 36. This really depends, though, what isolate here means. If she's staying at home with her family and can't make time to meet once or twice a week at the expense of friends or family time, then I don't think that's a red flag with him. It's a red flag with her. If, on the other hand, they're living together and he's unhappy with her meeting up with friends or family once or twice a week at the expense of time spent together, then yes, that'd be a red flag with him. And everything else in between needs to be analyzed on this spectrum. Story 37. I think manners as a number one criteria is one of the worst things you could choose. There are lots of mean people with great manners, and there are also empathetic people who seem to act coarsely, but will actually be nice whenever they get the chance. Not saying please and thank you does not mean you are not grateful. Lots of parents are mostly concerned with their children appearing well-mannered. They will do nothing when their kids act selfishly as long as they say please. I'm not advocating for people who act like pricks. It is a huge red flag indeed. But fixating over cursing and saying thank you is definitely not the best criteria if you want to know if a man is selfish or not. Story 38. My wife and I were both guilty of this the first 10 years of our marriage. Whenever conflict would arise, we would both get immediately defensive and it would spiral and escalate. Second marriage for both of us. Both of us would go into a defensive mindset if we felt we were being attacked. It's a pretty normal reaction. If we had allowed that behavior to continue, the marriage would probably have ended. Part of developing and growing a relationship is learning how to communicate with each other. So I'll say this. If your partner is continually going into a defensive position, stop that discussion and see what triggered their self-protection instinct. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.